Bebop Revolution, the birth of modern jazz. History of black music in America. Presented by
Guy Griffin,
Janiyah Drayton,
Jameer Colbert,
Marley Gordy,
and I'm Trinae Frazier.
October 20th, 2025.
As you know, our presentation is based on bebop. And a lot of people don't know what bebop is, so I'm here to explain. Bebop is a revolutionary jazz style that emerged in the early 1940s. It featured faster tempos, more complex harmonies, chord changes, and more emphasis on individual instrumentation and improvisation rather than melody for dancing. Basically explaining that bebop, before invented, used to be a jazz style that jazz, when you listen to it, was more of you're listening to it, dancing to it, not really paying attention to what you're hearing. Bebop is more of a sit down, we're playing it, you're listening, and you're understanding more of the chord changes and the tempos. Here's an example of bebop.
Peanuts, salt peanuts. Salt peanuts, salt peanuts.
The historical context. Bebop originated in Harlem during the post-World War II 1940s. It was developed through late-night jam sessions with the Earl Hines Orchestra. It was driven by a need for creativity and self-expression and wanted to get away from the rigid structures that came with big band. Swing bands at the time, or big bands, were centered around a single band leader who was often the front man and would often get most of the representation and the fame from each band. And at the same time as this frontman was getting all the recognition, the talented players within the band wanted to make a name for themselves. And they felt the most effective way to accomplish that was by doing improvised solos. Also, this industry of big bands and swing music was very hard for Black people to break into due to racial barriers and during these times, the 1940s and 50s.
So I'm currently about to show you a video that discusses more into a deeper dive of what bebop really is, and it shows great visuals of the birth of the jazz movement and its historical context and why it's so important to African American culture.
It's the most sophisticated music America has created in the last 100 years. It was started as an outlet for younger musicians to distinguish themselves from the older musicians of the time. It's this nation's classical music. What is bebop? Join us on Big on Bebop. Swing was, while certainly not without musical merit, intended to be popular dance music, palatable to a mainstream audience. In fact, the swing style was intrinsically linked to dancing. Its steady 4-beat meter and moderate tempo was meant to cater to dancing crowds. Swing bands were also characterized by their large size and greater reliance upon written music in comparison to earlier jazz bands. Swing bands usually featured soloists who would improvise on the melody over the arrangement. At the beginning of the 1940s, many of the musicians in these bands were looking to break away from the rather rigid structure of the big bands. Talented soloists began to feel constrained by the structure of the big bands during this time. Musicians had begun experimenting with their ideas regarding improvisation and jam sessions in nightclubs throughout New York City. One of the most popular was Minton's Playhouse, which was located in Harlem. Many musicians who were to become some of the bebop's greatest innovators, such as Charlie Parker, Dizzy Gillespie, and Kenny Clark, played at these jam sessions and cutting contests. Compared to the relatively simple music of the swing era, the increase in complexity and musical freedom was a very significant change that would result in very different sounding music that had a significantly greater focus upon improvisation, technical skill, and individual achievement. Bebop was an art music intended to satisfy the jazz musician with its technical complexity and focus on improvisation. To attempt to put it simply, bebop altered all three basic elements of music: melody, harmony, and rhythm. The improvised melodic lines were lengthened and went seamlessly from chord to chord, and the harmonies themselves were more complex and influenced by early 20th century classical composers such as Ravel, Bartok, and Stravinsky. The rhythmic pulse became more subtle as well, and the drummer carrying the beat on his cymbals instead of the bass drum as before. Overall, the creation of bebop marked a crucial turning point in the history of jazz, signaling a shift towards more complex and innovative musical forms and influencing the trajectory of jazz for decades to come. Bebop, our nation's classical music.
Cultural impact and critical concepts. Bebop wasn't just another style of jazz. It completely transformed the meaning of the music. Before bebop, jazz was mainly seen as popular entertainment, something people danced to listen to or casually. But bebop changed that. It turned jazz into a form of deep artistic expression, especially for African American musicians who used it to show creativity, individually, and pride in their identity. What is really important is that bebop became known as the musician's music. It wasn't just about pleasing masses anymore. It was about the art itself. The fast tempos, complex harmonies, and improvisation required skills and understanding. It gave musicians a way of challenging themselves and each other and to make a statement that their artistry deserved to be respected on a much higher level. This led to its cultural influence in extending the early civil rights movement, symbolizing self-expression and resistance.
These are some of the founders of the bebop movement. Dizzy Gillespie, who's a trumpeter from South Carolina, who is often recognized by his large cheeks while he's playing. Charlie Parker, who's a saxophonist from Kansas. The Earl Hines Orchestra, who is actually credited with having the first kind of example of bebop music in their personal jam sessions. And Thelonious Monk, who's a pianist from North Carolina. This video is just a short snippet of the song Blue Monk by Thelonious Monk. And in this performance, he's actually performing with another prominent bebop saxophonist named Charlie Ruse. And this performance kind of showcases the competitiveness between each member of these bebop bands and how they want to kind of one-up each other with every solo and try to make each solo more complicated than the last. So when people listen to the song, they think, oh, this person had the best solo in the song. So, yeah.
talk about the innovators. Melodic freedom. Bud Powell gave the piano a new voice as a leading melodic instrument in bebop. He adapted saxophone phrasing to piano. Rhythmic freedom. Kenny Clark and Max Roach invented modern jazz drumming by shifting the time to the ride cymbal. This freed the bass and snare for accents and interactions. The collective impact. Together, they created the agile, on conversational sound of the modern jazz quartet. And now I'm going to play Un Poco Loco by Bud Powell. This isn't just a song, it's a rhythmic conversation Powell is having with himself, perfectly capturing the title's meaning, a little crazy. It's a masterpiece of rhythmic ambiguity and independence. Powell's right hand plays fiery bebop lines, while his left hand creates a persistent, hypnotic Afro-Cuban rhythm. Now I will talk about imitation, assimilation, and innovation. Imitation. Bebop didn't appear from nowhere. It began by learning the language of the swing era. Assimilation. Musicians then absorbed more complex harmonies and rhythms. Innovation. They transformed these elements into a new, challenging art form. Let's take a quick listen. You can hear the swing foundation, but also the new adventurous harmony and rhythm. This one track shows all three stages at once: imitation, assimilation, and full innovation.
Reflection and analysis. Bebop redefined American music through rebellion, intellect, and innovation. It proved Black artistry could reshape global culture, challenge norms, and assertive creative independence. So for me, what I took through the book, Bebop united art and activism. It transformed creative defiance into musical progress and assertion that innovation is both empowerment and cultural pride. Charlie Parker Jr. and John Dizzy Gillespie embodied this spirit, showing how artistry could be resistant, inspiring generations to see jazz and identity and intellectual liberation. So, with that, more like what I think about it is like when I think about bebop, what really stands out to me is how it changed like the purpose of jazz. It wasn't just about playing music people could dance to anymore. It was like becoming to express and just be more free with music. And I find it inspiring that musicians like Charlie Parker and Dizzy Gillespie were willing to go against what they were popular at the time for to create something completely different on their own. And to me, bebop feels more like a style and a statement. These artists use their music to show pride in who they were and to prove that jazz could be deep, complex, and like intellectual. I think that kind of courage to push boundaries and focus on creativity over popularity is what makes bebop that much greater. And it just reminds us how like art can reflect a bigger story. In this case, the struggle of recognition and respect within Black culture. Bebop transformed jazz into something that wasn't just entertainment, but a form of identity and self-expression. And that's what I take away from bebop. Q&A. So I'll read the question and then give it 10, 15 seconds, and then I'll read out the answer as well. What 1940s social factor fueled bebop's rise? World War II and racial segregation limited opportunities for Black musicians, leading them to seek more artistic freedom. Bebop became a form of self-expression and rebellion against commercial, dance-oriented swing music. How does bebop differ musically from swing? Bebop used faster tempos, complex harmonies, and unpredictable melodies instead of the smooth, danceable rhythms of swing. It focused on small groups, improvisation, rather than large band arrangements. Why was bebop seen as revolutionary? Bebop transformed jazz into an art meant for listening, not dancing. It symbolized freedom, creativity, and intellectual side of African American music culture. How does the rhythm section roles evolve in bebop? Drummers, bassists, and pianists became more interactive instead of just keeping time. They used accents and comping to support the response to soloists. And lastly, how does bebop continue to influence modern music? Bebop's complex harmonies and improvisation techniques shape modern jazz and inspire genres like hip hop and fusion. Its spirit of individuality and musical freedom continues to influence artists today.
And now to give an overview and recap of the whole presentation, to give a more in-depth detail of bebop, like I stated before, it started in the 1940s, early 1940s in New York City. Also, it was originated, and the leaders were Charlie Parker, Gillespie, and also Monk. The sound is very fast, complex, improvised, The purpose was more of an art form to show the depths of jazz and how there's different chords instead of more so dance. It was more so in depth of you sit down, you listen, and you're really orchestrating what you're hearing. It was always in small combos. I don't know if y'all noticed that. It was never in big bands. It was more so 2 to 3 people playing, never a huge band of people. And it was basically the foundation of modern jazz.
No. So, in summary, bebop wasn't just new songs. It was a complete reinvention of the jazz ensemble. Through pioneers like Powell, Roach, and Clark, the rhythm section became a controversial partner, and the piano a leading voice. This new sound was built on a foundation of imitation, assimilation, and finally, brilliant innovation, defining modern jazz as we know it.
So overall, bebop reshaped jazz into something so much deeper, not just for African Americans in the U.S., but for musicians all over worldwide. Bebop is a powerful form of artistic freedom and cultural pride. It wasn't just about the music at the end of the day. It also represented creativity, individuality, and resistance during an important time during our history itself. Bebop also gave a voice to Black identities and inspired generations of musicians to express themselves and to venture off into different forms of the art that they're using through jazz. And during this movement, it created so much people coming together and just uniting as one and sharing and exploring much more deeper senses into the music of jazz and different categories.
And then what really stands out to me as well about bebop is how the impact it still shows in music today. It just wasn't about what went on back in the day, but the creativity and just the freedom that bebop music fought for to open the door for so many other styles like hip hop and pop and just all the genres that we listen to today. I think that's just something that I really like about bebop. And just for me, bebop is more than just a chapter jazz history, but it's also a reminder that art can challenge limits and inspire change. And it shows the world that music isn't just about the sound, but it's about the identity, emotion, and just the courage to be original as well. And I think that's what Dizzy and Charlie and all them they did very well at. So.
And if we take a final look at the big picture, we can agree that the sound was redefined. We moved from the swing era's big bands to the agile conversational bebop quartet. The instruments were liberated. Bud Powell made the piano a frontline voice, while drummers like Roach moved the pulse to the ride cymbal, freeing everyone for more interplay. The music was transformed. This new language emerged through a process of imitation, assimilation, and a process we heard in classics from A Night in Tunisia to Bud Powell's rhythmically daring Un Poco Loco. In short, bebop gave jazz a new complexity, a new rhythm, and a new soul.
My personal biggest takeaway was how it kind of went from, because if you think big band, personally I think Cab Calloway and how he was more of an entertainer. And I feel like bebop kind of moved from watching someone dance and dancing along with them to truly spotlighting the creativity of Black people in that era. And I feel like that was something that kind of big bands missed when only focusing on the front man. Not saying they weren't creative as the big band, but I feel like the quartets and the smaller bands kind of definitely shined a light more on each individual person rather than having a band of 15 people all trying to make a name for themselves.
Well, thank you for listening to our presentation. This was the Bebop Revolution.